Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by the beautiful Gina of SheHaunts. How you doing today, Gina?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing so well. I am so excited to have you here. I want to talk about you personally here for a second before we get started on the reason that we're here so people can get to know you a little bit. You've always been a huge fan of all things spooky for your entire life. You love to watch scary movies, read spooky books, and draw various characters and sketchbooks, which is so cool because the spookiest I could ever draw was like a stick figure with some red on him to show he was bleeding. That's about as deep as my spooky drawings went. So
That's great. You're being creative, so that's all. It's what it's about.
right. Well, I mean, your creativity expands beyond art. You actually did attend college and majored in fine art, and your paintings and drawings tend to lean on the darker and creepier subject matter. You do paint and draw things such as skulls, haunted houses, and spirits, which you've had in various galleries from Miami to LA, New York, and Tokyo. What is that like to know that you have exhibits that have your art in them that people are going and looking at? That's got to be an amazing feeling.
It's really great. And honestly, for me, it was all about the journey. I got to visit these places. I got to be a part of these exhibitions, and I got to meet some really great artists. And that was the best gift I could have ever been given from doing this. And I'm just all about the networking and getting to meet some other artists and getting to meet gallery owners and hearing their stories. And it's all about that connection for me. So I'm just so thankful to be a part of that community.
Well, and it's also when you're meeting these other people that have the same type of creative nature as you, it's easy to find influence in them. That's why I love working with guests and learning how horror started for them, because it's a huge influence for me as well to learn. We may have grown up thousands of miles away from each other, but we really grew up the same, doing a lot of the same things and learning about horror the same ways. And knowing this, though, like you started off with art and drawing, which is so amazing, and you took your art to a different level. Thankfully, you have a very supportive and paranormal skeptic husband. He bought you some ghost hunting equipment back in 2019. You've been going to haunted locations ever since hunting. Now, you've gone everywhere from California, New Orleans, Florida. Obviously, you've been to the Lizzie Borden house, Salem Witch House. There's no way I'd ever be able to pronounce it, but the haunted forest over in Japan, the underground Seattle tunnels, like the things that you've seen and the things you've experienced are amazing. And I know that you haven't seen the full body apparition yet, but you have had anomalies in pictures, electronic voice phenomena, interesting orbs. That's another thing when you capture something like that. Like you said, it may not be a full body apparition, but to capture something, like I think that's the big thing is what happens when we die. And you've seen evidence that there is something more, no matter what that something may be. We don't go underground and burn out like a candle. So what's that like for you when you get, these anomalies in the pictures or the electronic voices or the interesting orbs? Like, what's that? I can't imagine what that feels like for you.
It's like finding the treasure chest, and it's overcoming this great obstacle that you set out for yourself. And for me personally, I started out at a young age, and I've been exposed to all these movies, as we spoke about, scary books and stories. And then later on in life, I lived in a haunted location, and just becoming part of that, having that as part of my story, and trying to, at every step of the way, trying to debunk these things. And then when I couldn't find a reasonable reason why these things were happening, that to me is so exciting, because then you can say, all right, I can't figure out why there's voices. I can't figure out why there's a figure banging on the wall, and there's nothing that defies logic. There's nothing that's logically creating this. So
Right.
To me, that is such a huge part of what I do. And I will only talk about and post the evidence that I capture, because I don't want to post the maybes, I don't know,
Sure.
an orb, or maybe this is a voice. I'm only posting what I've gone through, and I've heavily debated, is there any sort of reason behind this, or how can we debunk this? And that evidence to me is so crucial as a part of me, as what I set out to do, because I do care about where we go when we die and what's the next step. And to me, it's a new frontier. It's a new chapter in discovery and in science. And it's an exciting it's an exciting place to be a part of, and it's an exciting field. So that's why
Yeah.
I do what I do.
So this may be an impossible question for you to answer, because one question I get a lot is, man, you've had a lot of guests on your show. Who is your favorite guest? And that's an impossible thing for me to answer, because each guest that I've had on here means so much to me for so many different reasons. But is it possible for you to say which location you visited is your favorite?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt, the Lizzie Borden house to me was such an iconic location, because even as a young child, I heard about the case. Everybody knows the nursery rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When they heard what she had done, then she gave her father 41, I believe is the song. Forgive me if I if I made any mistakes on that. But learning about this story, and it really intrigued me, because it involves a young woman, and how could she possibly kill her family, and all of the court proceedings that surrounded this, and the fact that she was acquitted, and all of the evidence that was there. And it always stuck out in my mind as a really interesting story. And I had thought for many years, many years, that she had done it, case closed, she was the murderer, hands down. And then when I got a chance to visit the home, I went in with my ghost hunting equipment. There was a small group of people that were gathered for this guided paranormal investigation. And I got a chance to really speak to the docent that was working that night. And I asked her some questions. I asked her some very, lengthy questions. And I wanted to know, because she said to me the first thing when we spoke, that she didn't think that Lizzie did it. And I said, how could you feel that way? Why do you think this? What's your reasoning? And she gave me reason after reason, proving that in her mind that Lizzie hadn't done it. And she said that through her years working at the Lizzie Borden home, that she not only received several compelling EVPs, which is electronic voice phenomenon captured through recorders, that she felt that the uncle was the perpetrator, and that there was a lot of evidence that she felt that maybe might have been skewed the other way. And after speaking with her throughout the night, and we were just comparing different stories and different evidence, and I guess now I'm at a point where I'm on the fence. And I think it's interesting to note that for many years I'd followed that whole trial, and I'd researched it. I'd followed everything about the case, and I've seen the movies, I've seen the TV shows, I've seen all those behind the scenes. And now I'm not so sure if she did it. So that was really cool. And, while I was there, I had some interesting experiences. I got to capture some interesting electronic voice phenomena, EVPs. There were some interesting spikes on our meters in certain areas of the home. And I really felt that at the point later in the evening, we were speaking with a person who I was identifying as Andrew Borden. And it was just a very interesting and very compelling experience to hear these different voices coming through that were answering our questions, and it was awesome. I really loved it. And I recommend everybody check it out if you're in the area, because you can take a tour, or you can stay overnight if you're brave enough. And it's
and what's so amazing about this is I hope that this compels certain people that are watching this to go out and do some research on your own. Because I know a lot of my friends are really into the Lizzie Borden case, and this is not the first time I've heard that theory. And I love the fact that we have people that will come on here and talk about that. And if you want to follow along with SheHaunts and all the amazing things that she's doing over there on the channel, all of Gina's social media links are down here in the description. So if you want to make sure you give her a follow, because this is something that I think is very important, especially for people like me. My mom's right here. We cremated her. I'm hoping I get the chance to kick it with her again on some plane of existence. So I was never, ever scared really of dying. But now it's just the fact of I have kids. What's going to happen with them? I need to make sure that they're okay. And, people like you give me hope that there is something out there after this. So I'm going to take a stab at this. What was it like in the Aokigahara forest? Was I anywhere near the ballpark on how to say that?
Yeah. It was a very interesting place, and I'm going to note that I didn't go really deep into this forest. I want to preface this story with that, because I was a little scared about it, just because you hear these stories of people finding bodies. It's a suicide forest, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know about it. And it's an area in Japan where people go to commit suicide. And
Yeah.
I know that sounds pretty terrible and pretty crazy, but you have to understand this is a different culture. It's a different country. And in this country, many people go to this place and they either go there because they're thinking about it. Maybe they're going through something, or they want to do it. And there are different color-coded flags that they hang from their tents just to alert people that are working in the area or other hikers know, either leave me alone, I'm thinking about it, or I need help, or, you know, please do not disturb, something along those lines. And it is a place where people do go to commit suicide. And so when I went, I've been going to Japan for many years. I go pretty much every summer other than the pandemic, obviously. And so in this area, it's a beautiful forest surrounding Mount Fuji, and there are many beautiful towns and little villages that surround this area. So I was in the area staying locally. And of course, when I heard what was in the area, I said I have to check it out. So we went to the entryway to this forest, and I didn't go too far in. I'm just, you know, I wasn't that brave. I was a little scared because it was spooky, and you feel this energy that surrounds you. The only way that I can describe it is the air felt heavy and thick. It felt ominous, and I felt a sense of dread. And even just kind of stepping into the forest a little bit, we felt that it seemed to be an eerie, quiet kind of vibe. And whereas you normally step into a forest and you're hearing birds chirping and things moving, and the forest is alive with all the creatures, it seemed very quiet. And it scared the hell out of me. And during this time where we were kind of walking around the outskirts of it, I felt this incredible sadness that I can only describe as possibly being a residual feeling of the people that had taken their lives there. And I had to leave. So I was only in the forest itself for probably about 45 minutes to an hour. And I felt this feeling that I wanted to cry is the best way to put it. And
that's heavy, man. Like just hearing the story, like it's just like, because we all know the story of the suicide forest. That's why I there's no way I'm going to pronounce that name right. There's just no fucking way that's ever going to happen. But you know, the sadness, like you said, that comes with that, and just knowing that you're going somewhere, knowing that you can't handle it anymore. This is the end. And
you feel their sadness there, and it doesn't go away when they pass away. And I do feel that it lingers. And you know, maybe it just might have been somebody was going through something so horrific and so tremendously terrible in their lives, and that feeling that they were going through stays in the air. It's in the trees, it's in the ground, it's soaked into the earth. And it's truly a place that if you're ever in the area, I would recommend going, but please only enter with the utmost respect. I did not use any recorders or any equipment when I was there. I truly wanted to just honor the people who had lost their lives. And I said a prayer when I walked in, and I said a prayer when I left. And it's something to experience if you're ever in the zone. It's a beautiful place, and it's definitely somewhere that will change your life if you ever get a chance to go.
Well, I'll say this. If I find a spider in my house, I want to run away and burn the house down. So I don't think I'll be visiting the forest anytime soon. I'm a big wuss when it comes to stuff like that. But I agree with you. I think it's one of those things where as long as you have respect. I remember, you know, I can't remember how long ago it was. It was a couple of moons, many moons ago. One of the dumb Paul brothers went to the forest and was recording dead bodies and putting it up online. And it was like the most disrespectful shit I've ever seen in my entire life. And you don't know what these people went through on their last day and the amount of darkness that they were holding inside of them. And for you to put videos of it up on the internet, it's cold. Like it's cold blooded, and it's really a heartbreak to see that there's people out there in our world that are like that. And what I love about you is what you're doing is genuine. You're not doing this for clicks on social media. You're not doing, you know what I mean? Like you're doing this because you're genuine love and your genuine interest of what comes next, and your genuine wanting and longing to find an answer to something. And for you to have honed your craft in such a way and to have such a supportive home with your husband, even though he's not much of a believer, for him to be as supportive as he is of you is very, very important. And I think that's awesome that he could be that way with you. So I want to stress this again, guys. You can follow along with all this by clicking these links down here in the description and following her on social media. I promise you, you will not regret it. And you're going to get to go follow along for the ride because I don't know if you have anything planned right now because we have been pretty pandemic heavy, but do you have any trips planned here anytime soon that you're going to be going on?
Well, speaking of Japan, we're actually crossing our fingers because recently the Prime Minister announced that they are going to be opening Japan for tourism, and they're going to start opening the borders early to tourism groups, guided tourism, and which we're not interested in that. So we're hoping that at least maybe that will open up the doors for other regular tourism. So we're kind of hoping to see. And if that's the case, we're going to be back in Tokyo, back in the Mount Fuji area, Osaka, and all areas around Tokyo. And if that's the case, I'll be back there and maybe I'll be posting some videos and some photo evidence. We'll see. If not, I'll be kind of up and down the East Coast as I usually do. I do like to travel domestically up the East Coast. I have lots of friends and family that I visit. And whenever I visit a new place, I will visit all the spooky places along the way. So that's my ideal.
Well, I can't wait to follow along on your summer journey. And we know now what you're doing in the future, hopefully going back to Japan and maybe hitting the East Coast again. And we know what you're doing now. But for a second, Gina, I want to go back to the past. And I want to talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And boy, when I think about it, does it all make sense? Gina, your first horror movie was?
The Exorcist.
And like I said, I think it's funny because my first horror movie was House from 1986. And horror comedy is my shit. I love horror comedy. That's my favorite genre. And The Exorcism being, a movie about possession and, a lot of Catholicism and religion and, the afterlife, and which has really influenced you into what you're doing now. I think it's amazing how horror movies can really impact us. Do you think that watching The Exorcist first may have put you on this path of, what you're doing now?
That's a great question. It was such a huge influence to me in my younger years, and it opened my eyes to this fascinating world of spirits. And of course, I'm also a Catholic. I've my whole life, I've been in the Catholic religion, and the fact that there is a huge emphasis on good versus evil, especially in the movie, it's the superheroes in this film are the priests that exorcise the demons. And just at such an impressionable age, seeing something like this, wow, this little girl, she's about the same age as I am, and she could become possessed by a demon, and seeing the journey of what happened to her and how her family and friends took care of her, and eventually she was saved. It was a huge impact on me, and I continued from that point. I continued to read about stories like this. I researched countless cases of other possessions, and it absolutely sparked something within me to look more into these things and to see if they were in fact valid, and see what sort of evidence surrounded these cases. And to my knowledge, there's been so many different cases that have been reported throughout the years, and there is a lot of truth in that story as far as these cases that have been reported. And it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And I wanted to learn more, and that's what I did. I just kind of went on this path to find out as much as I could and become basically a sponge to all the spooky and paranormal that I could get my hands on.
Right. And you said you were about the same age as Reagan. Do you remember about how old you were the first time that you would watch The Exorcist?
Yes. So it was funny. I was 8 years old, and my father loved this movie. My mother also loved it too. They were, when the movie first came out, they were the ones that went into the theaters, and they got a kick out of seeing people faint and all the craziness that surrounded this type of movie being in a theater. So as soon as, I forget why it was when I was 8 years old, but my father sat me down and we watched this movie. We made some popcorn and we sat down together, and he said, okay, so throughout the whole movie, okay, you're going to see these flashes of the demon's face, and I'm going to show them to you, and you're going to see them. They're going to be here and there, and you really have to look, and it's an Easter egg hunt. And he was so excited to show me this movie. And I watched it with him and I was excited and I sat there thinking, oh man, this is really serious.
Yeah.
It was a heavy movie. And
Mhm.
I just remember my absolute terror watching some of the scenes in this movie. And after it was all done and said and done and the movie was wrapped up, I had some crazy nightmares, really
Yeah.
crazy nightmares. And that was, believe it or not, exciting for me. I know that might sound a little strange to some people, but I wanted more. I wanted to be scared. I like the feeling of being scared from watching a scary movie. And that was the first time I really felt that way. And I think even now as an adult, I know the movie was made in the 70s, but I truly think that the artistic way that they spun the scenes of Reagan becoming consumed by this possession was truly terrifying.
Oh, I've always said I still believe to this day that The Exorcist is the scariest movie that's ever been made. Um, it may not affect people now the way that it did back then, but what again, sorry for repeat viewers, but this is the only movie. My parents owned a video store growing up, so we had our little mom and pop video store, and this is the only movie my mother ever shut off. She was like, "Nope, we're not doing this." So this movie, I think, always had a stigma around it because of that. And I can't imagine watching this, as a young lady, because I think that watching it as a young man versus watching it as a young lady would have a completely different effect on you. As a young boy, I see my kid sister there. What can I do to help her? As a young lady, it's you putting yourself in that position. And I've also talked about how this is one of the movies that scared the shit out of me as a kid, but scared the shit out of me as an adult, as a father, for completely different reasons than it scared me as a kid. You can go back and watch this movie now as a parent or as an aunt or an uncle, as an adult that loves children, and watch it and view it in a completely different light than you did as watching it as a kid. So, do you remember which scene it was, Gina, that affected you the most from The Exorcist?
Absolutely. And for me, the scene that affected me the most from the movie was when Father Karras and Father Marin are preparing to go into the room. They've reached the home. They're standing there talking to one another, and they know what they're about to do. They know they're about to face the absolute most horrific situation they probably will ever face in their lives. And you can see it. Their apprehension going into that room is it's heavy. And when they open the door, the atmosphere changes and you feel this intense feeling of dread, because you look over and you see that demon tied up on the bed, because it's not Reagan, it's not her.
Right.
And she's got these hideous glowing eyes that just pierce through the screen. They just look into your soul. And she's breathing really heavy, and you can see maybe perhaps the temperature in the room has been reduced, possibly because of the paranormal activity. She's got this breath that's showing in the room, and just the whole atmosphere feels just terrifying. And you can look at these two priests, and they're looking at each other like, holy shit, we're about to face the biggest thing we've ever had to face.
Yeah.
And when she starts levitating and she starts in with her taunting and screaming and her snarls, it takes you to a different level. And for me, it transported me to a place of terror, really, because, as a kid, I'm looking at this thinking, how could this happen to a little girl? Is that really a little girl? How could this little girl be taken over by a demon? And that whole scene for me was the most horrifying scene. And just watching it now, I just rewatched it a couple of days ago just to have it fresh in my mind to talk to you about it. And it's
Appreciate it.
chills. It gives me chills. And I do watch it probably, I would say, at least once a year. I do. It's one of my top favorite movies. I watch it about at least once a year, and I get chills every time when I see that scene.
I completely agree with you. And I love the scene right before that, like when they first show up, and you've seen it on the cover, you see it on, posters. But when he shows up and he's underneath that street light, like you just feel it's so ominous at that point, and that we're about to see some of the scariest shit we've ever seen in our entire life. And we know which scene it was, Gina, that affected you the most. But this is a hard question to ask for this movie, especially. But what would you say your favorite scene from The Exorcist is?
So my favorite scene from the movie is actually, if you understand why. So in the beginning of the movie, they're sort of building up the reasoning for the demonic possession. They're showing you how Reagan became possessed. And this is kind of behind the scenes a little bit. It's not as in your face as everything else. But in the beginning of the movie, she's speaking with her mother in the basement of the home that they're renting. And she's talking about playing with a Ouija board and speaking with somebody called Captain Howdy. And she sort of just nonchalantly tells her mother, oh, I found this Ouija board and I've been speaking to this entity and he's friendly, but he doesn't want to talk to you. And for me, why this is one of my favorite scenes is because we're seeing Reagan for who she really is. She's a child. She doesn't know any better. She's an innocent little kid. She's lonely. All she has in this home while her mother is filming a movie, because her mother was an actress, she has the help, the hired nanny, maybe the butler, whoever's staying in the home. She doesn't have any children to play with, any friends. She probably doesn't know anybody. So she's just hanging out in the basement, bored as heck, looking through what's down there. And she finds something and she's playing with it. So it shows you her innocence because she doesn't know any better. She's just a little girl. And for her to pick that up and she's speaking to someone is, and many, going into the paranormal, is opening the doors to allow for a demonic possession. So it's showing you that she is an innocent girl and she's opening that door by speaking to someone alone through a Ouija board. And I like that scene because it's showing you a little bit about the character of her, and it's kind of giving you a little background on how she got possessed. Because I think if you don't know those things, you might not really understand why did this demon come into her? Was she a terrible kid? Was she misbehaving?
Right.
Did she not do the right thing? And no, it's just because she was messing around with something she shouldn't have been messing around with. And she had no idea.
Well, it's funny because I just talked about this on a recent episode, and I think anybody that grew up, I think I'm a little older than you, but I think people that grew up in our age range, our parents were like, Ouija board, fuck no way you're bringing that shit in my house. I'd rather find meth in your pocket than a Ouija board under your bed. Like that was how my mom was. She was like, there's no fucking way you're bringing one of those things to my house. So I love the fact that you bring that scene up. So obviously, and right now we don't have any say in this matter because it is happening, but remakes, requels, sequels are all the rage. And we do know now that they are doing a requel to The Exorcist. Blumhouse has picked it up. It is going to be coming out. What are your thoughts on them doing a requel? It takes place, I think they said 20 years after the events of The Exorcist. What are your thoughts on that?
I am not a big fan of reboots and that kind of thing. I also feel like it's been done so many times, and I'll watch it because of course I'll be curious to see what direction they take it in. But I'm not a big fan of that kind of thing. I think if you make something such a beautiful piece of art, and in my opinion, I really do believe that this is cinematic art we're talking about, I don't think it's fair to really make any sort of sequel to it because it's never going to measure up to the magnitude that was that first movie. And it's not, number one, it's not fair. And two, is it how much farther can you possibly go with it?
Sure.
Because it's been done.
And that comes up, you know what? First, let me talk about this requel real quick, and then I'll talk about the next thing I want to talk about. And I think my answer might actually shock you, but will I watch The Exorcist requel? Yes, of course I will. I'll be there opening night. Do I think it's necessary? No, of course I don't. But what I do love about this, and Halloween 2018 is proof of this. When Halloween 2018 was announced and the trailer started showing, I believe the sales and the streams of Halloween 1978 shot up like 700%. So one positive we could take away from this is younger people that have never seen The Exorcist or may have never heard of The Exorcist, once they hear about this remake, requel, reboot, they're going to go back and they're going to experience this movie for the first time. So to try to air a little bit of positivity into this, I think that that's one thing about requels and remakes that we can, kudos for, because they are going to introduce a new audience to a movie that we grew up loving so much. And even if the requel or the remake, whatever you want to call it, even if it sucks balls, it doesn't take away from how beautiful and amazing that first film was. It might actually make us appreciate it even more. So I will say that about the requel. And I think I know your answer because of what you just said, but I got to ask you, The Exorcist is part, as of this filming, of a 5-film franchise. There are 5 films in this Exorcist franchise. Which of the 5 films is your favorite?
I do feel that the original is my favorite. I haven't seen them all. I've seen some of the other ones, and I just wasn't very impressed. I did not feel the same air of dread and terror when I watched them. And for me, I just didn't care for the rest of the franchise. I really didn't. And I understand why they made them, because they wanted to go a deeper dive into the characters and they wanted to do a deeper dive into the subject, but it just, I felt like it was a waste of time for me.
See, for me, I think the first one is the scariest movie that's ever been made. I think The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, is the worst movie that's ever been made. We did a top 10 worst horror movies. It was number 1. I think it's the worst. Right. But The Exorcist 3 is my favorite in the whole franchise. I think The Exorcist 3 is such an amazing movie. It's a supernatural slasher. It's got some of the best acting I've seen. It's got real, genuine, funny moments. It has the best jump scare of any film I think ever made. And I think it's a criminally underrated movie for 2 reasons. 1, how good the first one is, and 2, how shitty the second one is. A lot of people left the second one like, this is dead, this is done, and they never got to watch the third one and see. I mean, Brad Dourif, the voice of Chucky, plays the Gemini killer in The Exorcist 3, and he's just such an amazing actor, and that whole scene is just so beautiful and brilliant. And so I'll always say that 3 is my favorite. 1, however, the scariest movie ever made. So we talked, Gina, about The Exorcist and what that movie means to you. And right now, at the time of filming, they are filming Scream 6 right now, but I was lucky enough to get my buddy Ghostface to come off a set so he could ask you a question real quick. We know what your first horror movie was, but what's your favorite scary movie, Gina? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
I would have to say, without a doubt, Poltergeist.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, I really, really enjoy Poltergeist. I didn't see it as early on as The Exorcist, but I really enjoyed that movie, and I also enjoyed the sequel and the other 2 sequels of that movie as well.
Part 1 I think is probably the best. Part 3 is my favorite in that franchise, where they're in the high rise and So I hate the ending, obviously, but there's nothing you could do. Unfortunately, Heather O'Rourke lost her life due to a medical misdiagnosis. But the first Poltergeist it's probably one of the scariest PG horror movies of all time.
Oh yeah, and another movie that really just rocked me to my core, seeing that something like that could happen to a kid. And I know it's a fantastic story that is not, something that would possibly happen to you, but just seeing those things and that family go through that. And, talking about the third one, what I loved about the third one is just how weird everything was. It was just such a weird movie. And there's still scenes of that movie that don't really make sense to me, and I still love them. It's such a spooky movie. And it's the way that everything, what I love about the Poltergeist movies is, it is this wholesome kind of family vibe. And at the time when I was watching these things, I was simultaneously watching Full House and, all of these family friendly shows. And so you have this family unit that is so strong and so powerful, and they care so much about their daughter or their sister. And it's such an interesting message, because throughout all of that horror, they're really they pull each other together, and I really like that. I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but I really
it's the truth.
Movie too.
Well, I love that. It's like on Thursdays we watch Poltergeist. However, on Fridays it's TGIF on ABC. So we're gonna watch Family Matters, Full House, Boy Meets World. Like, I'm right there with you. Like I said, I totally remember the TGIF Friday night block, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Step by Step. Like I remember all these things. That's so rad. So I do appreciate, Gina, you coming to hang out with me for a little bit. This has been a whole lot to me, and I want to remind everybody the social media links are down here in the description. But Before I let you go, I do have one last question for you. And I think I know the answer, but God damn it, I got to ask. We're going to go back to The Exorcist. And what we're going to do is we are going to rank this gem on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking this on acting, production, score, even though it has one of the most underrated scores of all time. Nothing like that. What we're doing, Gina, is we're strictly ranking this movie on how much it affected you on first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. What would your ranking of The Exorcist be?
I'm going to go with a 4.5.
That's perfect.
4.5. And it really, I stand by that 100%. It's amazing. It's a scary movie. Everything about it, just the way the movie was shot, the actors, and like you said, the music isn't that great, but it's not about the music. It's about the hardcore acting and everything that went into makeup and the effects that they had at the time. It is just such a spooky movie, and it deserves to be respected.
I completely agree with you. I think, like I said, to me personally, this is the scariest movie I've ever seen in my life. If I had watched The Dark and the Wicked when I was a kid, that probably would have taken the prize. I think that's the scariest movie that's been made in the last 10 years. But Gina, I do want to thank you again for coming on and hanging out with me. Don't go anywhere, though. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.